I'm Olivia Arfuso, an Assistant Preservation Planner in the Historic Preservation Department at the MPC, and today I'll be presenting the last webinar for this year's Preservation Month. I know some of you joined us for the Historic Site and Monument Commission presentation that was given by the Historic Preservation Department Director, Leah Mahalik. Today's presentation will focus on Savannah's local historic districts, the what, where, and why. So to begin with, we're just going to introduce the MPC for anyone who may not be familiar with who we are. The Chatham County Savannah Metropolitan Planning Commission was jointly created in 1955 by the Board of Commissioners of Chatham County and the Mayor and Aldermen of the City of Savannah to develop a master plan for the orderly growth of the district and the residential and industrial development of the city and the unincorporated portions of the county. Our mission statement is, the Chatham County Savannah MPC provides an accessible planning process, sound professional planning products, and recommendations to ensure a greater quality of life for all to enjoy a community that is historic, sustainable, mobile, and prosperous. This illustration shows you everything that falls under the MPC umbrella. The department's staffed by the MPC, including our very own Historic Preservation Department, and the boards supported by the MPC. So first off, why historic preservation? Historic preservation is vital for countless reasons. Old buildings have innate value. Historic architecture tends to attract people and give a sense of place. Old buildings are reminders of a city's culture and complexity. And maybe one of the most important reasons, in my personal opinion, regret goes only one way. Once these buildings are gone, they're gone for good. State enabling legislation allows preservation to be implemented. Some of those include the Preservation Act of 1966, the Georgia Historic Preservation Act of 1980, the identification of significant historic structures, of course, the zoning ordinance, which allows for design review and demolition protection, and the design review criteria itself, as well as development regulations. So who does what in Savannah? Now, these certainly aren't all the groups in Savannah that participate in, encourage, or support historic preservation, but these three tend to be confused with each other quite often. These are actually three different organizations. So other than the MPC, you also have the Georgia Historical Society, which is a research institution responsible for collecting, examining, and teaching about the history of Georgia. And you have the Historic Savannah Foundation, which is a nonprofit with a mission to save buildings, places, and stories that define Savannah's past, present, and future. Our department in particular recommends or grants certificates of appropriateness or COAs. We also ensure that those COAs are in compliance through inspections and violation reports. We update historic inventories and surveys, as well as perform property research. And of course, there's always public outreach. We also have boards that are supported by our department. Those boards are the Historic District Board of Review, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Historic Site and Monument Commission, which Leah Mahalik spoke about earlier in the month. Certificates of appropriateness are required for any changes to the exterior of any building in one of Savannah's local historic districts. We will go into specific local historic districts a bit later in the presentation, and conservation districts, on the other hand, only require a COA for the demolition of a contributing historic building. So what is a local historic district? A local historic district is an area that has been deemed significant to the city's cultural fabric and therefore protected through a local ordinance. As many of you probably know, Savannah's local historic districts are some of the most highly valued neighborhoods in the city. Design standards and the designation of historic resources are made possible by the Preservation Ordinance. Local historic district designations can help to stabilize property values, provide protection, and prevent unregulated change to neighborhoods. But what is the difference between a National Register historic district and a local historic district? Well, a National Register historic district is a type of historic district that is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register of Historic Places identifies historic resources within our country that are worthy of preservation. This requires an extensive process involving identification, documentation, and evaluation. There are some differences between what a National Register historic district and a local historic district can provide. A National Register historic district cannot restrict the use of a property, does not require compliance to design guidelines, and does not prevent the demolition of historic buildings and structures within designation areas. Some may say that it provides a lot of recognition, but not as much protection. A local historic district, on the other hand, requires local historic preservation commission review and approval based on conformance to local design guidelines and provides a review of any proposed demolitions within designated areas. However, both National Register historic districts and local historic districts can be utilized independently or together as effective community preservation tools. So now we're going to go into Savannah's local historic districts, beginning with the Downtown Historic District, which I would assume everyone is very familiar with. The Downtown Historic District is bounded by River Street to the north, East and West Gwinnett Street to the south, East Broad Street / Trustees Garden area to the east, and West Boundary Street to the west. The district was established in 1966 and was recognized for its importance when it was designated a National Historic Landmark. The Historic District Board of Review has purview over this particular district. The Victorian District. The Victorian District is bordered by East and West Gwinnett Street to the north, East and West Anderson Lane to the south, East Broad Street to the east, and May Street to the west. The district was established in 1981 and consists of 45 city blocks that were developed between 1960 through the 1920s. The Historic Preservation Commission, also known as the HPC, is the board that reviews all demolition, new construction, and all major projects proposed within this particular district. All other exterior work is normally reviewed at staff level. Now we have the Streetcar Historic District. So this district is surrounded by East and West Anderson Lane to the north, East Victory Drive and a portion of West 44th Street to the south, East Broad Street and a portion of Price Street to the east, and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to the west. The district was established in 2005, and historically its development is largely related to the electrification of Savannah's streetcar lines. The Historic Preservation Commission also has purview over this district. Next local historic district is the Cuyler-Brownville Historic District. This has a little more complex border, but it's roughly comprised of a portion of West Anderson Street to the north, West Victory Drive to the south, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard to the east, and portions of Mace Street, Colic Street, and Ogeechee Road to the west. This is one of Savannah's oldest African American neighborhoods, and any demolition, new construction, or major projects are reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. Savannah also has 4 conservation districts, and these are Ardsley Park / Chatham Crescent, Ardmore, Parkside, and the historic Carver Village / Flatman Village. The purpose of a conservation district is to preserve the character of some of Savannah's older neighborhoods that may lack the protection of a local historic district overlay. All proposed demolitions of historic buildings are reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission to ensure that as many historic buildings are conserved as possible and that the character of the overall district is maintained. So now let's learn a bit more about the board and commission that oversees these districts. The Savannah Historic District Board of Review, also known as the HDBR, was established in 1973. There are 9 volunteer members who meet the second Wednesday of every month at 1 p.m., and all meetings are open to the public. The Historic Preservation Commission was created in 2019. 9 volunteer city residents make up the commission, and they meet the 4th Wednesday of every month at 3 p.m. All meetings are open to the public and welcomed for anyone who would like to attend. Now we're going to talk about some of the standards in the local historic district ordinances. So any proposed project that will affect the exterior of a historic building is reviewed using the Secretary of the Interior standards. These standards help to ensure that the historic integrity of the building is retained and preserved, and that all work is appropriately undertaken and aligned with the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation. Then we have visual compatibility standards. These make sure that the height, proportions, rhythm, materials, textures and colors, roof shapes, walls of continuity, scale, signs, and expressions of front elevations are all visually compatible with the contributing historic structures to which the proposed work will be visually related. So this is an example of a new construction townhouse that is visually compatible with the historic buildings to which it is related. It is compatible in overall rhythm, materials, height, and scale. And here is another successful example. And this is an example of poor visual compatibility. This building is clearly not compatible with other contributing buildings on the ward. So design standards are the bulk of the ordinance and can be considered the design specifics that are unique to each district. They are defined, measured, and precise. All of the design standards sections are listed here. I won't read through all of them today, but for example, there are design standards that cover foundations, exterior walls, entrances and doors, windows, shutters, storefronts, and even roofs. Design standards allow for predictability for homeowners and developers. They allow for consistency as well as a stronger basis for decisions, and they help to avoid personal opinions or conflicts of interest. You may be wondering why all of this is important. Well, no design regulations or review can lead to the use of incompatible materials, incompatible alterations, the integration of incompatible design styles, and even demolition by neglect and demolition by renovation. And here we see some examples of those. Development standards are also really important because they help to regulate land use, lot coverage, setbacks, and density in the local historic districts. If you or someone you know owns a property in one of the local historic districts that we spoke about today, then it's really important to understand the process of applying for a Certificate of Appropriateness. So we're going to deviate from the presentation and I'm going to show you where to find the applications and all necessary checklists. First, go to the mpc.org. When you find yourself on the main page, you want to scroll down to where it says Quick Links and click Applications, Instructions, and Forms. This is where all of the Certificate of Appropriateness applications and checklists can be found. If your property is located in the downtown historic district, then you will refer to the top section that says Historic District Board of Review. You will need to complete the main HDBR application, as well as the checklist that corresponds with your proposed work. And you can see all the checklists over on the right-hand side. So you'll choose the one that aligns with the work that you'll be doing. And all payments can be made electronically by clicking the red button on the left-hand side. So this is where you'll make any payments. If your property is located in the Victorian Historic District, the Streetcar Historic District, or the Cuyler-Brownville Historic District, you will refer to the application and the appropriate checklist from under the Historic Preservation Commission section. Currently, unless you're applying for a special exception, there are no payments necessary, although this is always subject to change in the future. And here you can see the application. This is also the application you would use if you're requesting approval for the demolition of a contributing building in one of these conservation districts. And the demolition checklist will be the corresponding checklist that will need to be submitted with that main application. So this is the checklist for the demolition of a contributing building in a conservation district. So all applications and checklists should be submitted electronically to historic@thempc.org. Just make sure that the file size does not exceed 15 megabytes. If you find yourself having any trouble, there's always alternative arrangements that can be made by contacting the MPC directly. So if you still have any questions after our Q&A session, feel free to contact myself or Leah Mahalik, the department director, and our contact information is right there on the screen.